And then the next item on the agenda today are the Commission's rules to increase the credit card surcharge payable by Medallion lessees under the Commission's lease cap rules. The current TLC rules call for a review of credit card usage every 6 months and a formula for considering whether the existing credit card surcharge should be increased or left unchanged. Based on the most recent review, the Commission is recommending an increase in the surcharge of $1 for daily shift leases, $6 for weekly shift leases, and $12 for weekly Medallion only and Dove type leases. The rules were originally published in the City Record on March 21st, 2014 with a comment deadline of April 21st, 2014. One written comment was received and has been forwarded to the Commissioners. No changes were made to the rule for consideration today from the rule as originally proposed back in March. The final rule for action, which was unchanged, was posted on the Commission's website and transmitted to the Commissioners on May 12, 2014. We have a number of speakers today. I will call the speakers in order. I would ask you, when you begin to speak, to state your name, and if you're affiliated with an organization, to state for the record the name of the organization. And I would remind people that they have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker we have listed is Richard Thaler.
Chair Joshi and Commissioners, good morning. Full-time lease drivers are now required to pay over $3,000 annually to receive their fair revenue from card fare payments after paying all operating costs. This proposed rule will increase the cost to lease drivers by 10% or over $300 annually. If it is likely that the percentage of card fare payment continues to approach the rate in express checkout retail environments, drivers will be paying over $5,000 annually. The TPEP rule passed on March 31st, 04, based on Mayor Bloomberg's review and approval of the original TPEP reference design in February 2004, was compliant with payment card industry and MasterCard Visa rules for merchant payment card acquiring that requires each independent contractor driver to either choose or become the merchant of record and be charged a competitive interchange plus rate for qualified cards, usually under 2%. Other than taxis, no other TLC business license, whether a barbershop or a restaurant or any retail business, is required to process credit and debit cards payment only with processes specified by the New York City licensing agency. The Commission's unprecedented TPEP 2005 implementation procurement conflicted with and violated payment card industry and MasterCard Visa rules, which define the merchant as the individual or entity providing the product or service. Under the procurement, the original TPEP rule, which set the driver's surcharge cap at 5%, violated these lease drivers' right to choose or become the merchant of record and benefit from open market competition. While hundreds of certified card processing gateways compete in a very competitive card processing industry, without justification, the TLC has created a barrier to entry for certified payment gateways by bundling card payment with other TPEP features, denying drivers access to the lowest competitive processing charges. Before any increase in the lease cap for card processing is considered, the Commission should re-examine its policy and properly separate card processing from other TPEP features and functions in order to achieve compliance with payment card industry rules and practices and make available the latest advances in no-fee, person-to-person mobile payments as reported in yesterday's Wall Street Journal and the subject of a recent mobile payment provisional patent filing. As comments regarding this issue have been previously presented to resolve this violation, once a driver is logged onto the TPEP system, fare payment processing can be routed by the TPEP vendor to the payment gateway of the driver's choice using the standard payment card message format ISO 8583. However, until compliance with payment card industry merchant rules is adopted and integrated with approved TPEP vendor systems, the excessive card processing costs to drivers can be remedied in 2 ways. Applying common point-of-sale credit debit payment practice in compliance with Dodd-Frank card payment rules, a discount for cash payment could be applied to a new rate of fare increase by 5%. Alternatively, a 5% surcharge could be applied to credit debit card fare payment under Federal Judge Rakoff's decision enjoining New York State from preventing passenger credit debit card holder surcharges. In any event, lease drivers should at least be given the option to either be charged 5% for each card fare payment transaction or choose the flat charge added to the lease cap. Hope you give this consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have a question. I thought the drivers didn't want the 5%. I thought, didn't we have this whole thing last year that they didn't want the 5%?
There are two issues here. The question is, as I discussed, 5% was mandated as a lease cap, as a cap in the original TPEP procurement. What I claim is that open competition would allow various, there are hundreds and hundreds of payment gateways that process cards for retail.
So, Mr. Thaler, the issue of what the appropriate percentage is not actually the subject of this rule.
But it causes you
It is
to
part
evaluate
of the
increase.
review process, but the 5% is a separate TLC rule.
Totally,
Yes.
totally. I'm just suggesting that open market would allow competition, and so that could be re-examined, or you could change the rate of fare in the two ways I mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much. And to your question, Nora, there prior to the fare and lease cap rules that went into effect at the end of 2012, right? At the end of 2012, the drivers paid 5% of all their credit card revenue as at the end of the shift to cover transaction costs. In order to encourage drivers not to refuse credit card fares because they were reluctant to pay the transaction costs, we changed it to an upfront flat fee based on the then percentage of credit card usage, which was probably between 40 and 50%. But I'll rely on one of our good policy analysts in the back to give you the exact percentage, but closer to 40%. The credit card usage rate has gone up. It's now closer to 55%. So the review process is a method of reevaluating the flat fee, which is, you're correct, based on a rule that requires 5% as the understood transaction fee cost.
May I add concerning my last remark, if you read the rule about the lease cap for this purpose, $10 going to $11, the way it's written, it seems like the lessor has the right, 105 plus 10, has the right to apply that card fixed rate to the lease cap. But I think that the driver should also have the option of whether to pay 5% on each transaction and pay the basic lease rate, or pay the bundle. I think they should have, it should be two ways.
Okay, thank you very much for your input.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Bill Lindauer. I'm with the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. We represent the 50,000 licensed drivers, as opposed to the trade associations that represent a handful of taxi tycoons and do not work in the driver's interest for the most part. Virtually not at all. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. When the TLC passed this rule, it was not the Commission's finest moment. It was because we were afraid of a lawsuit, a meritless lawsuit, just like the ones that filed against us for the Health Disability Fund. Incidentally, remember last time there was a disabled cab driver here last hearing? He would be getting money if that fund was in effect now. But hey, because they worked for the driver's interest, right? So he didn't get any money. Congratulations.
Stay on topic.
Okay. Getting back to so these people do not need the money. Warren Buffett doesn't need a tax cut, he says. These people do not need a percentage increase out of the driver's pocket. This is an insidious way, not insidious, actually diabolical way of grabbing a lease cap increase by the backdoor route. And this is unconscionable and morally repugnant. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Beta Vita Psi.
Good morning.
I'm Meera Joshi, Executive Director at the New York Taxi Workers Alliance. Actually, if I may, I'd like to answer Commissioner Marino's question. I think that is the question of the hour. At the time that the rule was passed from 5% per transaction to a fixed amount, it was part of an overall fare raise. And, there was an expectation and a belief that the amount, that the $10 amount would only be negotiated as part of of another fare raise. And as Bill said, what we're doing today is basically, it is a form of a lease cap increase without the context of a fare raise, which is really unheard of in this industry. Imagine, the $10, once it's on the lease, that means if you had a bad day, the car is broken down, and maybe you've had, very few credit card fares, you're still going to be paying that $11. If you're a weekly driver, if the car's been in the shop, if you're a driver, owned vehicle operator who is responsible for those vehicle repairs and maintenance, if that car is on the shop, you still have to pay for your lease up front. And that includes the $11, which is now going to be, your debt is fixed, while your income is not guaranteed in this industry.
If I can just interrupt, but that was the whole thing we did, was it 2012? My God, time flies. That was the whole thing. Before, it was a percentage only of the credit card receipts, and you guys didn't want that. You wanted the flat fare. So I don't know why now you don't want the flat fare.
At the time that the flat fare was discussed and that rule was promulgated, it was part of a broader fare raise, and so the understanding was that that base amount would only be increased, in relation to a subsequent fare raise.
That wasn't in the rule, was it?
No, but that was part of the logic, that was part of our understanding when that rule was debated and publicly discussed. It was only undone, as Bill said, about 6 to 8 months later, as a result of a lawsuit, right?
And that's a result of the data too, that there's a much greater increase in credit card use. I mean, I know every time I swipe a card for my business, I have to pay a percentage to the company.
Sure, but which is probably closer to 1.5 to 2%, maybe even 2.5. Okay, 3%. It's still not 5%, which is what we have to pay. And on top of that, the revenue that comes in from advertising, from the technology, that goes only to the owners. None of that goes to the driver. So the owners are already getting the ad revenue to offset the cost of the technology. On top of that, now drivers are paying, and imagine the volume in taxi cab, the amount of credit card-based fares collectively within the industry. So of course, when that volume is that high, they could easily negotiate. Square came in at one point and was charging 2.75%. So it's not at 5%, but that's what that's the rate that drivers are having to pay. And now that we're increasing this amount, and because it is fixed on the lease, it means that even on shifts that you're not completing, because of there's a problem with the car, you may have fallen sick mid-shift, whatever it is, because that cost is added onto the lease, you're still paying that entire amount. As Mr. Thaler said, the thing to do here is to make it either, percentage, should be going back to percentage base. If the amount, is the fixed amount is not going to be evaluated as part of an overall fare raise. And as far as the data, what is that data? Where is that data? We don't get to see any of it.
The data is generated from our TPEP records. It is subject to FOIL, so it's available for the public pursuant to a FOIL request. And also, you mentioned the 5%, and Mr. Thaler mentioned the 5%. The odd number years in April, we have to have by rule a fare and lease cap hearing, and that's the forum for us to gather evidence about the percentage rate for credit card transactions. So we look forward to hearing your testimony, especially then, on that issue.
I would just like to say for the record though, I do think it would have warranted a public presentation on the data because the TLC has it and the vendors have it and the fleets get to have it through the vendors. We're the only ones at the table who don't have full access to that data. And I do think that should have been publicly released as part of this rulemaking process.
I appreciate that, but I also encourage you to take advantage of FOIL, which will give you the data that was underlying the calculations.
Madam Chair, I will say the FOIL requests take quite some time, so even if you...
We have a good record with FOIL responses.
That's good to know, that's good to know.
So, again, in closing, we're strongly opposed to this rule, and we do hope that the commissioners who voted in favor for a raise to go to the drivers, in that spirit, that they would vote against this rule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Drivers are directly employing thousands of mechanics, dispatchers, and other personnel who mostly live and work in the 5 boroughs. Most people will agree that the acceptance of credit cards in yellow taxi cabs, which began full scale in 2006, is one of the best service innovations in New York City taxi service, both for passengers and for drivers who, according to the TLC, have seen tips increase as a result of credit card usage. It's simply much easier to choose that 20, 25, or 30% suggested tip on the payment screen than when cash was the only option. Today, credit cards account for 64% of all taxi fares. Taxi owners are, in almost all cases, the merchant account holders with the credit card companies. Therefore, taxi owners pay all credit card-related fees to the credit card companies, and they are responsible for the credit card equipment. TLC rules require that fleet owners pay drivers in full at the end of each shift, even though the credit card companies often take 2 to 4 days to release these funds to the fleet. When the TLC eliminated the 5% credit card fee that merchant account owners could recoup from taxi drivers, it replaced it with a $10 flat surcharge based on the credit card usage at the time. Subsequently, the TLC passed Rule 5821C5, which set forth a formula that allows for the credit card surcharge to increase if credit card usage increases. The Commission voted to approve that formula on June 20th, 2013. The TLC has now determined, based upon the credit card data that the TLC has obtained and the formula that this Commission has approved, that credit card usage has increased and that a $1 per shift increase in the credit card surcharge is necessary. To be clear, this is not a lease cap increase. This is data and formula-based upward adjustment of a surcharge that goes entirely to offset the increase in credit card usage. In fact, 5% credit card surcharge was eliminated and a flat fee approved in the same fare and lease rule package that provided a 17% fare increase to drivers and a 0% increase in the lease caps to owners. This small increase in the credit card surcharge is necessary to meet the data-proven increase in credit card usage in yellow taxi cabs. It's necessary to comply with the TLC rule that you passed, approved on June 20th of 2013. It's based on a formula that TLC staff presented and that the Commission has voted to approve last year, and MTBOT respectfully requested to approve this measure. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. And also, Beta V Design, prior testimony, requested credit card data. We do, need to go through the FOIL request process, but we actually have the data available for you now, so we can share it with you today.
Thank you.
Rodney Stiles in the back is available to speak to you after the meeting with the data.
Okay, thank you.
So that was our last speaker. If the commissioners have any questions, otherwise I can call it for a vote. Okay. So we'll just, all in favor say aye.
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 Okay, the rule passes.
And with that, the meeting is adjourned at 11:20. Thank you very much.